when Kathy and I first talked about this event last year, she said it's power of design, it's complaints, what might we have sessions about? And I sort of fairly instantly thought, well, what is the most highly designed and intensively managed process that is experienced by more people and probably in more people's lives provokes more complaint than any other? Air travel. For better or worse, she thought that was a good idea. Our moderator today is a person far more as equipped to have lead this discussion than anyone I can imagine. Alastair Gordon is an award-winning writer and critic for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, has appeared on the public radio show Studio 360. He is a curator, he is a cultural historian, a publisher, and perhaps most importantly for this, he is the author of a terrific cultural history called Naked Airport. Alastair, over to you.
Thank you, Kurt, very much. And thank you, Kathy, for pulling this amazing circus of cultural delights together as a swan song of some sort. I love it. I'm going to just, give some idea of the format we're going to use. We're going to each have 5-6 minutes to talk about things that we're passionate about air travel. And then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. I'm going to quickly introduce everybody now. Dickie Davis, who's right here, who's worked for more than 30 years at Miami International Airport and is currently Director of Public and Customer Relations there. She's been a pioneering advocate for travelers with disability and launched a series of innovative initiatives, such as a partnership between the Miami International Airport and the Disney Institute. Kevin Doesksen, at the far end there, has worked for American Airlines for 16 years and is currently the Managing Director for Customer Planning and Analysis. Among other responsibilities, he was in charge of developing the airline's next generation airport strategies. Nancy Novogrod is well known to many as Editor-in-Chief of Travel and Leisure magazine, and as such keeps pace with the ever-changing world of commercial air travel. She serves on the Board of Trustees of the American Academy in Rome and the New York Center for Children. Todd Oldham, well-known distinguished fashion designer and founder of Todd Oldham Studio, who's the host of Todd Time on MTV, and has produced many books, including a monograph on Alexandre Girard, the prolific architect and textile designer who really changed the look of commercial air travel with his rebranding of Braniff International. And Todd's going to be talking about Girard's work today. Ashlea Powell is a location director at IDEO, the New York-based design firm that rebrands companies and institutions with a human approach to marketing. She's worked in many different fields, including retail and education, and took a lead role in IDEO's campaign with JetBlue to create an egalitarian airline experience, as well as soften and upgrade the image of the TSA Transportation Security Administration. Not an easy job.
Good luck.
So thank you to all of them and for joining us. I'm just going to start with I need my little. I'm going to just start with kind of give some context of what we're talking about today. Can you hear me if I stand up? Does this works? Okay, good. Because I'm kind of tall to bend down to that. I love this opening quote by Arthur Haley in Airport, the book Airport. In the main passenger terminal, chaos predominated. And it is chaos. But it's what's interesting about airlines and air travel is it's all designed. It's a designed chaos. So it really translates as a major cultural expression that teaches us as much about where we're at as a civilization as any kind of art, music, or movies or theater. And it's just hard to read. It's a very hard place to get an idea and analysis of. And I've searched for years for good descriptions, going back to Franz Kafka here, who an appropriate writer for airport landscape. He visited an early airfield in Czechoslovakia in 1916 and came away with the description an artificial desert. Actually Marcel Proust, who I don't have here, he visited an early airfield outside of Paris and weirdly described it as, it reminded him of the beach, and he kind of dismissed it otherwise. Stephen Spender, the great English poet, visited Heathrow and called it a landscape of hysteria. And Rayner Banham, the great English critic, called the same airport a demented amoeba. But as Kurt said, you know, the airport and air travel experience has got to be almost top of the list for complaints in any kind of culture today. And how we love to complain about every aspect of it, from the bad seat to the bad food. Will the security scanner give me cancer? To mortal terror of complete oblivion. You know, all the more poignant this week with the Malaysian Flight 370 that's just mysteriously disappeared. And everyone loves to hate airports. As Dickie Davis, I quote her from that, everyone loves to hate airports, and I think that's generally true. Shirley Hazard, another writer I can't help but quote, described the kind of strange, otherworldly, slightly lightheaded feeling we all get sometimes coming through an air terminal. And she describes it as white light, thin air, and total absence of morning, climate, and substance. So what's most interesting to me is that it comes, and I don't want to be too long, as a place where we really are face to face with our own future, the own future of our civilization. And it's very rude awakening sometimes. When TWA opened in 1960, this is a great shot of Saarinen's first boarding tube, very, very ahead of its time. And it made me think of Marshall McLuhan's line about how any technology gradually creates a totally new human environment. And this really was a completely new human environment. Going back to Hugh Ferris's mysterious renderings of Idlewild Airport in 1946, this utopian future that's, you know, shows so much promise. The people looking out over these wonderful kind of almost like animals ready to burst out of the terminal and fly away. Yamasaki, who did the St. Louis terminal, before Saarinen did his flying kind of architecture. Here's the interior of the TWA, a wonderful architecture that's really entirely about movement. In a sense, replacing the feeling of stasis and non-movement that jet air travel created, and it surprised everybody. I.M. Pei's Sundrome, which changed a lot after he designed it, but beautiful. And of course, everyone remembers arriving in Paris in the central core where you really felt like, you know, a supermodel coming down these translucent, transparent chutes, and you knew you'd come to this incredible city. Atlanta Hartsville looking like, you know, the delivery gate for heaven or some afterworld kind of. And you do feel like you're sort of lining up to get into some kind of otherworldly kind of place. United Airlines in O'Hare trying to kind of disco-fy the transition between different terminals. And this amazing Sofia Airport in Jordan by Sir Norman Foster. Fuxas's incredible Shesing, China airport that's just opened recently. It's this vast landscape, so it's like a new city. And this so-called sustainable airport in Incheon in South Korea, which I can't imagine how any airport could ever be sustainable, but that's the idea, and this is supposed to be built in the next 7 years. Zaha Hadid's amazing, percolating airport for London, at least the proposal, which reminds me of something that's actually partly in the collection at this great museum, which is of Virgilio Marques' visions of buildings seen from airplanes in Italy in the 1920s. And a lot of the futurists would fly in planes and do drawings and do paintings from the actual airplane. And as Marques said, it gave, the roof became the new facade of the modern world and opened up buildings and architecture and urban planning to this whole other point of view that had never been seen before. And so you have this almost kind of these mouths and eyes opening. Le Corbusier didn't know anything about aviation when he designed his city for 3 million people and put one right in the middle of all his towers, kind of suicidally provoking our pilots to come in. Of course, that was never built, but he did fly a lot. He was the first really globe-trotting architect more than anyone else. And he did design an idea for an airport after the war, 1946. And he said, his line was, an airport should be naked. That's why I call this book Naked Airport, because he meant that the machine itself, let's see if this thing works. Yeah, the machine itself was so glorious and so unapproachable in terms of design that the terminal should just be this very low buildings, almost underground, and the people would come out from underground and go up into this amazing machine. But it also is a great title because the notion of the airport is just being something that's transparent and open, and of course in our own age it's about being literally stripped bare by the security process. A Bauhaus architect in Leipzig, one of the first all-glass restaurants, terminals. Again, Hugh Farish, this amazing sense of being in this new world, utopian world of the future. I'm going to go through these quickly. The automated terminal by Norman Bell Geddes, where really we become the guinea pig in this process of complete automation. Copenhagen, an amazing airport that's still there. That was finished right before the war started. And it gives you, Lauritsen was the architect, and you get the sense of everything was flowing with the spiral staircases, this sort of undulating roof, this very open space where the columns are near the outside of the building. And it's all about the theater, what Lauritsen's called the theater of air travel and all the possibilities that it brought. These early attempts to make a landscape based on Le Nôtre's formal gardens, 18th century gardens in France, which Wallace Harrison picked up on at JFK, looking for some kind of reference to what is this place, you know, that we've created. We don't know what it is. He goes to Versailles and discovers these great linear, and this is Kennedy. It used to be there. It's been torn down, but there were these fountains in these gardens. The Skywalk at LaGuardia, which was the beginning of the new kind of technological architecture that changed airports from human-scaled edifices to these stretched out kind of gangling appendages. This is Load Air, which is in 1950, where the planes would be pulled up to the terminal. The expansion of Logan, Boston, 7,000-foot long apron building. And then the strange irony of when the jet age came, philosophers and writers who actually were allowed to go on planes. In fact, a lot of the airlines like Pan Am encouraged well-known writers to take free rides to the West Coast. Roland Barthes said, "The jetman is defined by coanesthesis of motionless. In excess of speed turns into repose." I mean, that's a fairly dramatic change in human perception. So instead of feeling faster, the jet planes made you feel like you weren't going anywhere at all. My passage through space was unnoticeable and effortless. I'd flown not through space, but I can't see the rest of that. The airplane robbed me of the landscape, wrote Daniel Boorstin in 1960. And so in a sense, to make up for this lost sense of motion and movement and landscape, you get this kind of acrobatic architecture and flamboyant planning, as in JFK's 1956 airport loop with the Seven Wonders, all the different terminals. This one again by Saarinen, TWA, beautiful bird-like form. Everyone different and expressive. Saarinen's beautiful terminal at Dulles. Architecture is about placing something between the earth and sky, he wrote. The theme center at LAX, where in a place that was all about horizontal sprawl and highways, the chaos of the new LA landscape, they needed something to tell you that you'd arrived in a place called Los Angeles, and it was this kind of space age. Again, to stimulate the senses that were lost in the jet age, you have vague sexual innuendo of the airstrip by Braniff, which Todd might talk about. Coffee, Tea, or Me, we all know that. And this is my favorite, Lucille Ball inaugurating the first moving sidewalk in an airport. Los Angeles International, 1964. American Airlines was so upset, and they thought women would not dare to ride the moving sidewalk because they wear white gloves and they wear white shoes. So Lucille came on board the program and wore her white gloves and her white shoes and was showing how, see, you can do it, and my hands are clean. 3 years later, the same Astroway moving sidewalk becomes the opening sequence in The Graduate for total alienation. Dustin Hoffman arriving into this kind of no-place land. Gary Wintergrand's amazing photographs of these sort of dull, banal kind of spaces that the airport creates, the 747 and the father and the child looking out. Dallas-Fort Worth, the original design was based on a Hertz rent-a-car commercial where the guy, flew, I don't know if you remember this, he flies out of the plane and into the car. And so the whole idea of DFW was this narrow kind of break between air and road. And of course we know what that is. The first screening, security screens, in 1973 at LaGuardia. These are the first, I think, ever put up in America. And the New York Times treated it sort of like, it's like a fashion parade, and don't be afraid, don't be intimidated, it's wonderful. And they had their fashion writer cover the way people walked through this first. Of course, then it became more sinister, and in our own time, at Miami International, after all the hijackings to Miami, they got an architecture firm who actually specialized in high maximum security prison architecture with all these kind of redoubts and kind of feudal and kind of. And Paul Virgilio's great quote about, as the last gateway to the state, the airport came to resemble the fort. And these are images we're all very familiar with. So again, Naked Airport goes from Le Corbusier's notion of a place where we're just celebrating this new technology to a place where the technology is celebrating us in a sense and stripping us naked and making us question everything that we love and that is true about Western civilization, down to these biometric scanners, these iris scanners. I have this left over from, and now I'd like to bring Dickie up to continue. Thank you.
My name is Dickie Davis. I work at MIA. In my bio, it says that I've worked at MIA 30 years, but I'm here to tell you that is a lie. I didn't want to tell the truth because I've been there 40 years, and that makes me way too old. But the truth is I've been at MIA for 40 years. It was my first job out of college. I was a journalism major and moved to Miami. Couldn't find a job right away. My husband said, just take an airport job until something better comes along. And I entered MIA in the era in 1973 when the ashtrays were as big as almost this room. They were like giant flying saucers filled with sand. And my first day on the job, the airport manager was up on a ladder, the man in charge of the whole operation, up on a ladder with those menu boards with the little white press-in things, putting the flights. Those were the computers of the era. He was plastic lettering what was the flight and changing the boards. So I've seen a lot in my time, and I want to just share. A couple of years ago, we were approached by a production company to make a show about MIA, an idea that brilliant people had before, but the time just wasn't right. And you may have seen the show on TV. It was on the Travel Channel. I played myself. I don't even watch television. And that's the heaven's truth. But it was a novel idea. We gave them a lot of access, controlled access. There were 9 of us that were in the show, and we all, what they did is follow us around for almost 2 years. At the beginning, it was so weird to be mic'd. At the end, you're so used to it. I used to get home at night, and I want to go into the restroom, and I think, oh my God, I can't. I've got my mic on. I'll tell you a couple of things about MIA and then a little bit about social media and how it's totally changed my world. When I first started, of course, people would fax us a complaint, or maybe they would call, and I'd trudge down to the info counter and hear their complaint. And of course, as we heard Andy and Kurt talk, it's instant, sort of constant complaining about what's going on. It has turned my world upside down. There's probably 30 people a day that are tweeting me their problems. Just to let you know, if you live, I suppose most of you live in Miami? Show of hands? Okay, MIA is your airport. It's probably your airport to hate, but I want you to know a little bit about it. Then when you complain to me, at least you'll know what you're doing. We are really a world-renowned airport for a number of reasons, but in terms of stats, we're the #1 in international freight, and we're #2 in international passengers, jockeying always between Kennedy and ourselves. Sometimes we're first, sometimes we're second, but we're quite a busy international airport. World-renowned art, and beautiful, beautiful, stunning art. And I see you nodding. I mean, visionaries from across the world have made MIA a beautiful place and a showcase. This is Christopher Gianni's harmonic convergence, where you see amazing light and sound, and you have this interactive experience. My next is the favorite, and that's the truth. And that is Michelle O'Connors, who is here today. Now there is, ma'am? I'm sorry, but I'm not calling on you. There is over 1 million square feet of epoxy terrazzo at MIA that is beautiful. So much of Michelle's work, and one is more beautiful than the other. I am partial to this one. We rolled the first one out in 1995. I brought a show and tell. Michelle, you probably saw this. Look, this is the souvenir scarves that our then director gave of Michelle's work in 1995. Do you remember these? That we commissioned and signed by Michelle, and I've kept this forever. It was an amazing party. It was an amazing inaugural, and I just wanted to give you, as we say in the Twitter world, a shout out. These are some funny tweets. I'm going to go through these really quick. These are all real. This person said, man, this elevator music at MIA is just fabulous. This says, you think you've seen everything until you see a chick covered in feathers, passed out drunk at Miami Airport. And that's a picture of that. None of this is about complaints. This is just my way to butter you up so you're I love this one, but I just found out last night, yeah, sorry. Okay, cover your ears. Thanks, TSA. I haven't been touched like this since prom night. Thank you, Miami Airport, for forcing me to brush up on my Spanish against my will. My 11th grade Spanish teacher would be so proud. And lastly, I think, this is how I feel every day, Miami Airport is just too much fun for me to handle right now. I have a number of these. I'm going to show you just one more slide. The serious side of social media, or the utilitarian side of it, is we learn so much from the tweets that we get. And that's not just a party line. That is the truth. We have made so many changes and affected so much. It's in some cases design change. In other cases, just fundamental everyday changes that mean a lot to people. This is a tweet. All right, this is like a social. How many people have ever heard of this gentleman, Walshy Fire? I know, me neither. Well, guess what? Walshy Fire is a Miami DJ and one of those guys that plays music, I don't know what, I don't even know how it works. Anyway, Walshy Fire has 20,000 Twitter followers. So a while back I got this, and he says, thanks to the people at MIA Airport, which is airport, for the Walshy Fire, wrong. First he says, Miami Airport is the most unhealthy food option in the world. So I call Richard, my colleague, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And we Google him, and we find out he's a major influencer on Twitter. Why is that important? Obviously, it's about us, and we want to, change his mind. I took him offline. I spoke to him. I said, what if you try again? We've just named a plate after you at Icebox Cafe, which took, trust me, some quick doing. And we did that. He went back online after we named it the Irie Green plate, brown rice portobello mushrooms. The same plate 2 hours ago was called something else. And he went back on and said, thanks to the people at MIA for the Walshy Fire-inspired dish at Icebox. Can't believe how fast this happened. Check out my dish at gate D4 when you're flying. So much more. Blah, blah, blah. MIA and the staff and the owners of Icebox, thank you. 4 days later, he shouted out and said how great we were. Best airport in the United States. On and on. He called me privately to know if he could be our brand ambassador. I'm telling you, that's the truth. So it pays off. I'm going to skip this one just for time. 2 weeks ago, this guy woke me up in the morning, my little device, beep, beep, beep. You know how to start a day off wrong? At United, sorry United if you're here, but it's not about them. No air conditioning in the terminal at iFly MIA. You always disappoint. Join us in Concourse G. So I did, and the AC was broken, and we fixed it within an hour. He was still there and gave us a lot of really good news. I want to talk about this, and then I'm going to end. This is the elephant in the room at MIA, and those of you who live here need to know about it, and if you don't already know about it. The immigration arrival process at MIA is sorely, sorely in trouble. And that is no fault of ours or anybody who lives in this city. This is a function of not enough Customs and Border Protection officers. Usually when you give a presentation, you don't talk about your dirty laundry, but this is such a big deal, and you all know about it, and you all talk to me about it. So we're not hiding it. With the cutback in immigration personnel, with sequestration, it sometimes takes people 2 to 3 hours to get through MIA. That is unbelievable, and it's killing our city and our tourism. So what are we doing about that? We're doing a lot. And what I'd like you to do about that is join us and support us, and I can talk to you privately about what to do. But on Monday, 2 days from now, the director of MIA is going to Washington with a lot of congressional representatives to lobby for more officers. So this is not a political speech, but this is more about this really is happening. We don't want this to happen to our city, and we could use your help. So that's basically it. I'm gonna quit. I have a lot others, but we'll say thank you, and we'll talk in a little bit. Thanks.
There we go. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today, especially to be able to share my love of extraordinary man, Mr. Alexander Gerard. Gerard was a superhuman sort of human being. He went into some other realm of possibilities that most of us never even touch. He held an architect's license in 3 different countries. He produced volumes of work that renders the most active person just a complete flake by the time you get to reviewing what he did. But one of the things he did that sort of reshaped the way that we look at hospitality, much less airline hospitality today, is what he did with Braniff Airlines in 1965. So when Braniff had started a little bit earlier than that, they were just this sort of small airlines that traveled around the South and with a few destinations in Latin American countries. And at the time, the president was Harding L. Lawrence, and he had decided that air travel needed a new look. So he started forming bonds with a lot of other people. They hired an amazing new ad agency who then forwarded on to a request to Mr. Gerard to see if he had something new to say in this arena. Now, Gerard was one of those designers that you didn't really hire to do something, you hired him to do everything. And even if you hired him to do something, he was still going to do everything. So you might as well just bow to it and back away, because he really did know better than all of us. So he started approaching the airlines with a simple observation. I'm going to read this as his exact quote. And he said, "I began to look seriously at airplanes. They vary very little. Inside or out, they invariably have some stripes around the windows, a Buck Rogers something or other on the nose, and they are silver with red trim or silver with blue trim. The problem, as I saw it, was to destroy the monotony. And boy, did he ever." So Gerard started immediately working to reshape the fleet, physically what it looked like. So among the 56 planes, he divided them into 7s and painted them incredibly complex colors like powder blues, ochres, oranges, and yellows. He then designed over 56 upholstery fabrics that set into place in all sorts of combinations. There were stripes, checks, endless sorts of possibilities. And where one plane might be orange on the outside, the interior would then be perhaps blue or tan, or maybe even have an extra sort of shot. Gerard even worked with instilling some counterintuitive people to sell Braniff. And this was actually stills from Braniff's commercials in 1965 that they got Andy Warhol and Sonny Liston to do one. These are available on YouTube, and I urge you to watch them. They're some of the most confusing things ever. You can't even believe that this aired. And then they got Salvador Dali, too, who was completely unintelligible and beguiling, and I'm sure sent people to the airlines in droves. Mr. Gerard made over 1,000 changes at Braniff. He designed it wasn't like he picked a Pantone chip for a color. He submitted the mixed color. He did several alphabets for it. He brought in his own folk art collections, which were just unspeakably large, so much so that he gifted the Santa Fe Folk Art Museum over 110,000 objects in the 80s that still haven't been able to be fully archived. It's just a monumental amount. And he brought sort of bits and pieces of these things and to use as signage. Now, the pieces you see on the exterior were actually inserted into the airplane, sort of like a little counter card, and could be changed out depending on the destination. There's the cover to the International Braniff magazine. You can get a good idea about just how sunny the interiors of these airplanes were. You see the color combinations were mind-blowing and counterintuitive, yet so thrilling and charming and really friendly to be around. These destinations were not very long. You know, the flights were a couple of hours wherever they went. So it was pretty invigorating to be around this much stimulus for that time period. But we see these presented in sort of a spectral way, but this is not the way Gerard saw it. He would take the perfect orange stripe and put it with the blue tweed and then throw in a little bit of neutral. He just had the most beguiling sense of daring do when it came to color. It was just unparalleled. So in true Gerard form, he didn't just reclad the airplanes and redid your seats. He redid every lounge for them entirely. This was the first time that these furniture lines appeared. Herman Miller produced them for him, and they were the inspiration to what became Mr. Gerard's, it was called the Herman Miller collection, the Gerard group, that came out a few years later. And they were almost identical to the Braniff pieces with a few extensions. Like this two-seater only appeared at Braniff, and it appeared later as a three-seater in the line. But what was interesting about this, it looked fantastic when Mr. Gerard was doing on the colors, but he decided that he had a lot of faith in us as consumers. So he thought everyone should be well equipped to choose from the 144 options that were available for you to assign the back cushion, the upper welting, the center welting, the bottom welting, the top of the cushion, and the bottom cushion. All had separate lines. And there was no guidance. It was, here's the stacks of fabric. Please tell us what you want. And that optimism and faith has served him well through the years. You can see how, like, in the neutrals, there might be one shot of fluorescent orange sunny stripes that just ends up on the end. And as you know, this is exactly the same sensibility that we have as flying today. Like someone coming over to offer you a drink and all this space. But it's nice to imagine that even this was real at the time, but I have to kind of assume that these were just nice press photos, and it was probably just as harrowing then as it was today. But Gerard held hands perfectly with this sort of future-leaning point of view and always had great respect for the handicrafts and the artisans from around the world. So you'll see his absolutely magnificent hypergraphic posters sitting beautifully next to some pre-Columbian artifact. This curtain on the left is of note too, because it's the first time that Gerard developed this sort of cybery typeface that he used. Now, when you see it out flat, looks exactly like what we know as a computer print today, but this was well before computers. Mr. Gerard was very good friends with Charles Eames, who actually was a photographer of some of these images. Charles Eames would go around and take pictures of whatever they did together or Gerard did separately, so much so that you can find in the Herman Miller catalogs, even like the technical measuring with the measuring stick, Eames took those too. So whenever he could bring his friends into work, he did, and you can see that these are a hybrid of the Eames bucket chairs that were then stitched together to become what we now know as sort of traditional airline seating. I personally am endlessly blown away at Gerard's graphic sense. The way that he could communicate complex ideas, or in this case even multiple languages, in a way that was just thrilling. He spoke himself 9 languages with ease. And it just seemed to be, he was such a wise and he has such a wise and steeped and important point of view that no matter what he touched, whether it was something modernist or some ancient church, it still felt absolutely like Mr. Gerard. This image makes me laugh. It looks like a Thomas de Man photo. It doesn't look like an actual counter you would approach, but it was indeed how Mr. Gerard welcomed you. You saw a little bit in the earlier presentation with the Emilio Pucci striptease, which was indeed the case. There were 5 changes that Mr. Gerard and Pucci sort of worked together to transform, and somehow they did actually talk with the stewardesses into wearing the space bubble, which I do not understand how much conversation had to go on to get women to screw your plastic helmet on and get on the airplane for 14 minutes until you put on your wrap skirt with the matching pants. Crazy, but these boots are quite amazing and look terrific on Gerard's sofa. And to this piece to the right is just a great example of Gerard's dazzling color sense. Now, the graphics went way past just what you saw when you received your tickets or what was on the baggage. It went from literally every single thing you would interface with, from the soap bar to the salt and pepper shakers to, if you'll see center, that bright pink is a very charming barf bag. that Mr. Gerard, in his beautiful, graceful way, wrote on that should you not need to barf on the plane, you might want to take the bag and use it for other things later. He was always really encouraging, and in his graceful way, sort of made it seem reasonable. I loved that someone, one person could have the point of view to be able to see this deep into a project. And Gerard was supernatural, not only in his output, but literally in the way he did it. He would arrive at his office. I spoke to over 3 decades of assistants. He would arrive at his office in the morning, work till about noon, without speaking, disappear sometime mid-afternoon, and then come back. Sometime the assistants would arrive the next morning and there would be huge stacks of things done. And I saw these with my own eyes, so I know it's real, and I cannot figure out how any human, much less somebody at that point with the support systems he had, got this stuff done. It truly is supernatural. And nothing really exemplifies his beautiful color sense in these posters. That red and pink, these were the least normal color combinations of the time, but often seen in South America. And there's a great quote from Mr. Gerard talking about his frustration and why he wanted to make textiles, because he couldn't find primary colors like hot pink and red. So I know, we all know that hot pink is indeed not a primary, but for Mr. Gerard, this was absolutely the case. The graphics are very, very beautiful, and it left us with a really nice feeling, and it was sort of the last time I can remember enjoying being in a terminal. When I was a little boy, I would go wait for my grandparents at DFW, where one of the Braniff terminals were, and this terminal was really unique because the excavation revealed the bones of this fantastic dinosaur that was then installed. So imagine all of that with a dinosaur in the middle. So I clearly never forgot that, and then was really happy to find out all these years later that my design hero, Mr. Gerard, had been affecting me since I was a little bitty boy. So I'm happy to share this with you today, and I wish Mr. Gerard was around to design more stuff. Thank you.